tell us about Victor? Yeah.
Victor, that was my husband, and we were together for a long time. He was very funny, and he likes to joke, and I used to miss him a lot. I told him to talk about him, but
you were living here, right?
we lived down there, he's on the corner right there.
Where was the shooting, so I could have some frame of reference?
It was here in Mesa, right around the corner.
Was it at Mesa?
Not far from Mesa High School. Huh?
Oh, it was by Mesa Village, or no? Wasn't the Mesa Village shooting?
Mm-hmm.
It was in Mesa Village?
Yeah.
I have an audible witness, if you need one.
I'll talk to you. I have all of the investigative reports, but if it's somebody that's gone missed.
Okay, because I was living there at that time. I'm not close to where it happened, but in that community at that time, and I have an audible witness that lives on County of Westchester.
Okay. I'll check in with you and see.
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So you told me beforehand that you come out to a lot of community groups and talk about the situation. What do you say and why is it something you decided to do?
My focus is that I think that the police should not be investigated by police. And because just like what the things in my case, I just want the police to be treated the same way as anybody else does. And I don't think it should be a special privilege when a police officer does something wrong. So what I'm fighting for is for Victor, of course, but for everybody, because I don't want this to happen to anybody else. And I think that the police should be accountable for the things that they do. They shouldn't be able to just say, to lie. Basically, they shouldn't be able to do that.
Kelly, maybe you can weigh in and just kind of give us maybe a brief summary of what you found when you were looking into this case.
Well, as Shekinah just brought up about the police not telling the truth, that was one thing that really got my attention, Liam's attention in this story, is that the police officers and the police department's narrative changed over time. That initially they put out a press release or released information to the media saying Victor had grabbed and actually grasped this officer's gun and pointed it at him. That ended up not to be true at all. The officer
his POA lawyer, and then
there was about a 4-hour period of time that the officer was only with his lawyer and with we actually.
Could we back up maybe? Yeah. So there was so Victor was unarmed. Maybe we could just kind of quickly discuss the incident.
Do you want me to do that?
Sure. Remember.
I can do it.
Yeah.
Probably in my sleep. So there was a call to 911, and 2 officers arrived. There was an older gentleman, Officer Maynard. There was Officer McCarthy that arrived in a car. Deviating from normal domestic violence protocol, Shekinah was standing out front, and nobody went up and asked her what happened. Normally they send 2 officers so that each officer can talk to each person. Officer McCarthy has admitted that Shekinah appeared uninjured. Nonetheless, Officer Maynard or Officer McCarthy may have seen, or they allege that Shekinah pointed to Victor going out the back door, because they were in front on Flanders Drive, going out the back door of the condo and into the maze of the complex. Officer Maynard said, "I'm not chasing after him," probably seeing, and I'm speculating, seeing that Shekinah's fine. And Officer McCarthy took off in his car looking for Victor. The information that he had at that time was that it was a 31-year-old male and what he was wearing. Officer McCarthy spotted him somehow, and I'm not sure exactly where, got out of his car and instigated a foot chase, at which point Officer McCarthy was yelling, "Stop," some expletives. Victor was, continuing to ran through a gate into a narrow breezeway. The gate closed behind him. Officer McCarthy kicked it in. And this is where we have numerous ear witnesses and a few eyewitnesses who had thought that the incident was concluding and missed the gunshots. So what happened in that corridor, and this is indisputable according to corroborated witness testimony is that there was a struggle, that even Officer McCarthy himself admits that Victor was merely trying to get away the entire time, never took a swing at him, was always trying to get away. Officer McCarthy was able to sweep Victor's leg and get him onto the ground. At that time, the gun, and we believe the secondary weapon came loose from his ankle holster. Officer McCarthy was not wearing a secure ankle holster, so there was a secondary weapon on the ground at this point. Officer McCarthy did not realize it at that time, was on top of Victor. The witnesses across the way were able to see Officer McCarthy on top of Victor. They thought that the situation was under control because he had one cuff behind him. He was on his stomach. Officer McCarthy was on top of him. And this is where even Judge Burns has found that the story does not add up, because Officer McCarthy testifies that he had his taser out, a hand behind his back, a hand behind Victor's back, and was trying to cuff the right hand when he realized that his gun was right in front of Victor's head. So Victor's on the ground, again, only until this time trying to get away, saying, "Get the F off me, get off me, are you kidding me, I'm gonna sue you," because Officer McCarthy was, putting him under arrest, and he's not wanting to go to jail. So it's very telling that it's the moment that Officer McCarthy sees his gun that he decides that Victor's a threat. It has nothing to do with Victor. It has to do with Officer McCarthy, in my opinion, panicking because there's a gun loose. When he gets off of Victor, so he had one arm, he was about to cuff the other. He gets off of him, and at some point there's a taser that gets reholstered. So I don't know how many hands that he has, but when he gets off of him, he pushes the gun away, and then we have witnesses hearing 2 steps, and draws his primary as he's doing that and shoots. So the original story that came out was that Victor had picked up this gun and pointed it at McCarthy, but when he realized that the physical evidence wasn't going to support that, the story changed to, oh, well, Victor was grabbing for this gun. But how do you know, and this is where we get into some stuff that I can't talk about, everything I've said so far is a matter of public record, but this is where it all starts to not add up. So Officer McCarthy doesn't really even know that Victor had, whether or not he was reaching for the gun. He says, oh yeah, well, his answer is, well, he was trying to kill me. Well, there's no physical evidence that shows that his hands were even reaching for that gun. And here is the main issue in this case, and it all comes down to physical evidence, because when you have only 2 people that saw what happened and one is dead, you have to rely on the physical evidence. Our expert from Alaska, and this is part of Judge Burns' ruling, has testified that based on the trajectory of the bullets, Victor, who's a very lean man, very in shape, the first gunshot came in a trajectory like this, so we're calling that a submissive position. It came down at him like this, and the first bullet grazed his stomach. So what that says, if it grazes the top, is that he was flexed forward, so he was in a submissive position. If he was reaching, which we dispute that, but if he was reaching, if he would have been within 3 to 4 feet, his fingertips, of Officer McCarthy's gun, there would have been tattooing or stippling on his hands. There would have
McCarthy was saying that Victor was reaching both hands for
his gun. If that was the case, if he was really reaching for that, and he was within, I mean, imagine a yardstick. That's a long distance when you've got somebody in a submissive position. So if he's there and down like this, and Victor McCarthy's here, Victor McCarthy's saying, oh, well, I was scared. He was right there. Physical evidence doesn't support that. If he was not reaching, which we think that's the case, then, of course, he was still 3 to 4 feet, because on his head, his forehead, anything, none of that had the, residue or evidence of being in close range. And the city hired an expert that is the #1 guy who did not even conduct a test to figure out, in a case where there's self-defense is the main issue, there was no test done by their expert to determine how close the two parties were with respect to any part of each other's body. That, you know, I had a field day flying out to Arizona with that. And so that some of those things that I just explained served as the basis for the ruling. And that might, if any of you have read it, shed some light on where the judge is coming from and saying, this is not adding up, you know, the change in the story and everything.
So the district attorney ruled, was it within 6 months? It was about 6 months afterwards, that said that the shooting was justified because the officer said that he was fears for his life, concerned for his life. You filed a federal civil lawsuit, which is what's going through the court now. It is rare in these sorts of cases to get past the point where we are now, which is summary judgment. Summary judgment, basically the city says, hey, we don't think that the facts here allow for a jury to weigh in on whether this is a concern or not, or a brutality case or whichever. The judge noted there were a number of inconsistencies in the officer's story, and so that's allowing the case to proceed. The city recently appealed that ruling, and so that is sort of where we're at now.
I have a quick question, because I'm aware of the configuration of the development, which is important actually to the story. The particular breezeway that he went in, some of them you can go in and continue out, or is this where he would have been trapped?
He could have continued out.
He could have continued out. Okay.
And so basically, you know, our police procedures expert has opined that there was a number of things, especially since backup was there immediately. I mean, they were already called, because of the foot pursuit, there were already officers coming there. There were 20 different things that could have happened.
So let's maybe shift to some of the policy issues here. I mean, you know, you stated well that there were two people there who actually know what happened. You know, the city now, since then, has instituted a body camera program where presumably there would have been, you know, a record of what maybe you can speak to how important things like that are as far as accountability and for understanding what it might occur in situations.
I'm a huge proponent of the body cameras. I'm intrigued by the recent Point Loma shooting and why that body camera was not on. Have no idea or explanation. You know, have been given no explanation for that. It's unfortunate in this instance that the folks across the street closed the blinds. In fact, the one witness, who was one of the stronger witnesses, said that she closed it because she thought that the episode of Cops was over, and then immediately heard the gunshots and hit the ground. And so this is one of those actually few cases where we don't have a camera. Another excessive tasing case that resulted in amputations of the guy's legs because he went into septic shock, and that's caught on 6 different cameras. And so we can see from multiple angles exactly what kind of a threat that this guy was, and it's such a bummer. And that's why I think it's so important that we look at the physical evidence and we, you know, rely on even the last words of Victor. I'm going to sue you. I'm going to sue you. Last words of him, as corroborated by numerous people. At least 3 witnesses that heard that as his last words. That's not consistent with trying to take the officer out. So yes, body cameras I think are important, but you know, they have to get, this SDPD has to get their act together in terms of implementing a program that works. And I think it's going to be 5-10 years before they iron out, you know, the correct policies and all of that.
I really think, I mean, I'm the daughter of an career FBI agent, and so the body cameras are no substitute for an independent investigation. I mean, they're just one piece of potential evidence. Even that is somewhat questionable. I mean, I think about, you know, in something totally innocuous, you know, the instant replays for baseball now. I mean, they have 4 different shots when they're trying to make a call about a play. So I think we need to be careful about how much we rely on body cameras to be the arbiter of, you know, what happened. I mean, I think that's just one piece of the evidence, and it's no substitute for an independent investigation, which is what we really need to have happen.
Well, I appreciate you guys sharing this. Who can best summarize quickly the proposed reform for the civilian oversight situation?
I'm sorry?
I'm wondering who can best summarize the proposed reform.
I can do that.
We're running a little low on time.
Okay, I'll keep it,
Yeah.
and I can pass around the flyer, which gives a good summary.
Please do.
I mean, as I mentioned in my introduction, the proposal is quite simple. The county has a law enforcement review board that was also passed by the voters in 1990, around the same time the city's review board was passed by the voters. It has independent investigators, unlike the city's review board, which the civilian review board, 23 members, do their own investigation, relying upon the police department's investigation, basically. They use all the materials that the police department provide to them. In the case of the county, they have their own independent investigators. Currently, they're investigators that came from the public defender's office, so they don't have any career ties to law enforcement or the district attorney. The county board also has subpoena powers, which means that it's developed a working relationship with the Deputy Sheriff's Association, the Probation Officers Association, where the management there and the Employee Association have agreed that they will provide the documents that are requested of them by the independent investigators for the review board. They have subpoena powers, which is part of getting those documents. Mm-hmm. The county board also posts the reports of its investigation on its website, makes it publicly available. It posts more regular reports. The city review board doesn't even track complaints. We, Women Occupy, were trying to find out about 17 complaints that were filed in the aftermath of Occupy San Diego, and our city's Citizens Review Board didn't even know about them. They were turned in to the review board office, but they go immediately to the police department. So really the proposal is simply to have the city adopt the model of the county review board and to be much more independent and transparent.
Yeah.
I just went through on something really quick, and whenever I've done stories on issues involving the police, I'm always told, trust us, we will do a thorough investigation. What Christina's found is, in this case, the guy that was supposed to reconstruct what happened, he never required Officer McCarthy to do a walkthrough to explain, I did this, and Victor did this. And he also never reviewed the statement from Officer McCarthy. So he recreated what happened without even listening to Officer McCarthy's version of events. And so
that's noted in the judge's ruling.
Yeah, that was just really, that stood out to me and still sticks out to me.
Well, Councilman, so obviously the city's being sued, so you're not going to necessarily weigh in.
Speak too much, exactly. I was thinking that. I haven't heard this in closed session.
But there is a proposed reform of the Oversight Board. And also, I think across the nation, we're watching this movement coalesce about this issue. A lot of fear, a lot of tension about police and community relations. It's almost like we have a chance here to get ahead of it and to prepare so that we don't see an explosion of tension here as well. So can you address maybe your thoughts on proposed reform?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then what else we can do
Sure.
to ease those?
In full disclosure, I come from a law enforcement family as well too. Actually, my dad's retiring after 27 years at CHP on Friday. So with that being said, and I've had the opportunity to meet with Mark Jones a number of times. Actually, I think I mentioned this at the last public safety meeting that he was actually the first person that after I got sworn in that was him.
Really?
And yeah, he came up to me and approached me and gave me his list of proposals and reform ideas, and we sat down and met with him a number of times in my office and sat through this. What I haven't done though is gone through line by line what the county system is versus the amendments to our reforms or our review board. As well, I've met with the new executive director of the review board, and her name is slipping my mind now, but one of the things I asked her to do was to come back after they go through their process of updating their strategic plan and get ideas for what amendments and reforms that she wants to implement based on her review, come back to us as a public safety committee and let us know what those are, and then have an open dialogue with Mr. Jones and other members of the public who want to weigh in and see what reforms and amendments can be made to make the process more transparent, make it so that there is more independence on that side. What you did mention, and which something we have to be cognizant of as a city, is that any reforms to this process will have to go through the meet and confer process with the Police Officers Association, potentially others, as that process, which, depending on what is proposed and what the reforms are, can be a lengthy and burdensome process, as well. From the charter reform proposal side of it, once we get language, we'll have a lengthy discussion about that and whether to put reforms on the ballot, things like that. So that process will take some time. My hope is that before we institute that process of looking at amendments, is that we hear back from our new executive director first and get her idea and her take, and that way we can weigh that with whatever additional reforms would be necessary, if at all, to undergo that process. As well, too, we talked about the body cameras and the policy. In my discussions with the ACLU and Chief Zimmerman, that they've had an open dialogue back and forth about how to make amendments to the policy moving forward. We talked about the Pomona shooting in our discussions that immediately following that, Chief Zimmerman amended the proposal to have the officers turn on the cameras as soon as they believe or there's an institute of a level of engagement with the enforcement of their duties, and then the body cameras turned on. But I know that the ACLU and the police department have gone back and forth numerous times to continue to have an open dialogue about how to amend the policy for the body cameras, which, you're right, it probably will take about 5 years to actually have something that is a working proposal. But I think at this time, because this whole issue is so new, that is a living document, that it's not going to be 100% right out of the gate. There's going to unfortunately be some trial and error associated with that. But from my discussions with both sides, that everyone's agreed to have an open dialogue, open line of communication for amendments to the policy. And there's almost a working group that's been meeting to discuss this moving forward. So I don't think it's something where we can snap our fingers and it'll be done and we'll have the end-all be-all solution to this issue. But it's something that I think everyone, especially myself being on the Public Safety Committee and the Charter Review Committee, are open to hearing. Do you know if that item is actually,
It's on the agenda for
It's on the
June
agenda. Well, you know more than I do. I'm on the committee. So it's good to know.
We've actually been working with
I
Steve
didn't know that,
Hadley,
so.
who's the committee consultant, so we know we're on the agenda for
Well,
June
one of the
11th.
discussions I've had, and KBBS covered this, I've asked for a calendar of all the items to be heard and topic areas to be heard at the charter review. I don't have a copy of that yet, so.
We've been trying to get a meeting with your office, so hopefully we
Okay.
can do that.
I'll come back. Absolutely. Well, there you go. It's good to know.
Chris, just one quick question for you
Yeah.
as it relates to this. So there's a number of issues with respect to charter review, and anything that would amend the charter would have to go on the ballot. So there's a sort of a big global question: are we going to do it in one big measure, or are there going to be separate measures for separate things? I could see measures that might be more controversial, such as for reviewing or changing the police oversight board, or the trash tax, or things like that, being things that may want to be standalone rather than packaging it all together. But things like changing the word city manager to mayor on controversial things would want to would do that.
So my hope is that we develop either a measure or a number of measures that are more kind of cleanup language for the June ballot, and then have more of a policy discussion on larger policy items that would appear on the November ballots. The issue that we have to deal with is what's called single subject rule, which is that we can't have multiple subject areas included in one ballot measure. So what I envision coming out of the Charter Review Committee for June and November would be policy areas like finance, governance, and language amendments would be included under that subheader of these items. So it may be 2 or 3 measures on the ballot in June that deal with a subject matter or subject area, and the same thing for November. But some of these are pretty meaty items that will take a long time to discuss. If you watch our meetings now, they're very quick, they're very non-substantive issues. Again, there's cleanup, deleting certain sections of the charter that don't apply anymore, stuff like that. I think once we get to the February, March, April timeframe in preparation for the November ballot, that's where we'll potentially have a lot of sub areas, whether it's the People's Ordinance or Civil Service Commission or what have you, will be on the November ballot.
Well, so normally we wrap up, so anybody who needs to leave in the council, if you need to leave, that's fine. But this is now a chance for you guys to talk about media or about anything else you want to follow up on this.